And that's the end of the first half. As the teams head to the locker room, the Spartans lead the Bulldogs by a score.
You guys stink.
Geez, Coach, we're only down a couple of points.
No, I mean you guys really smell. You need to hit the showers. And here, I got every one of you new bars of soap from the Sterling Soap Company. Each bar is artisan crafted using natural ingredients and essential oils. They also have shave soaps, colognes, beard balm, and a whole lot more. Now get in there.
But Coach, we have another half to play.
I don't care. I can't stand to be around you.
A few minutes later.
All right, bring it in tight. You guys are still playing terrible, but you're smelling great out there. Now listen, you're going to need to stock up for the rest of the season. We got a lot of tough games left. So go to sterlingsoap.com after the game. That's STIRLING soap.com. You got that?
Yes, Coach.
Great. Sterlingsoap.com on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Sterlingsoap.com.
This is Basketball History 101 with Rick Loayza.
Welcome back to award-winning Basketball History 101, part of the Sports History Network. I am your host, Rick Loayza, and this is the podcast where we bring to life some of the forgotten stories from basketball history. We are bringing old school basketball to a new school audience, and today we bring you the story of the NBA's Territorial Pick. Now, I have mentioned the concept of the Territorial Pick in previous episodes where it pertained to the story, but today we are going to take a deeper dive into what the Territorial Pick was and why it was used in the first place. The concept of the Territorial Pick was used starting with the 1949 NBA Draft and was in place until it was last used in the 1965 NBA Draft. And of course, starting with 1966, the NBA got rid of it and it was never to return. So we will go through what it was and why it existed in the first place, and we will finish with some of the players who were selected using the Territorial Pick and their impact on the game. Now, through the first 20 years of the NBA, it was not the global multi-billion-dollar league that it is today. Through the first 20 years of the NBA's existence, it was on a really shaky foundation financially speaking. Through the first 20 years, most of the players needed jobs during the off-season in order to make enough money to cover the expenses of a typical middle-class family. None of the players were getting rich, and neither were the owners. At one point during the 1950s, the owner of the Boston Celtics, Walter Brown, had to borrow money against the value of his own house in order to be able to pay his players and keep the Celtics from going out of business. The man literally risked his house to keep the team alive. Now, this is how fragile the business of the NBA was during those first couple of decades. It really was not until the middle of the 1960s when the NBA as a whole began to find some solid financial footing, and then really not until the 1980s when the league finally became incredibly profitable. But during those first 20 years or so, the NBA did everything they could to get fans to come out and see their games. The primary revenue source back then was ticket sales. Today, the primary revenue source is television money and merchandising. Ticket sales are third place in today's NBA, but back then it was all about those ticket sales and some arena sponsorship. So the Territorial Pick was a concept that allowed any team in the league to draft a player that played their university basketball within 50 miles of that team's NBA arena. So in effect, it meant that the Celtics had first rights to any player that played within 50 miles of the Boston Garden. The Knicks had first rights to any player that played their college basketball within 50 miles of Madison Square Garden. And the Philadelphia Warriors had first rights to any player that played within 50 miles of the Philadelphia arena. And in exchange for using a Territorial Pick, the team had to give up their regular first round pick, because in essence, the Territorial Pick was their first round pick. And each team could only use one Territorial Pick per year. So if there were two really great college players in the Boston area, let's say one was from Holy Cross and the other from Boston College, then the Celtics would have had to figure out which one they preferred, because they could only use that Territorial Pick once per year. Now that we know what the Territorial Pick was, let us get into why it was used in the first place. Now, as I mentioned before, the NBA of the 1950s and 1960s was doing everything they could to promote its team and sell more tickets. So they figured that getting some of these college basketball stars to play for their local NBA team could boost ticket sales. And back then, college basketball was still far more popular than the NBA was. Madison Square Garden would often sell more tickets for a college game than they would for the Knicks. They often sold out those college games, but had a tough time selling out the building for the Knicks. These college stars came with their own built-in fan base. So let's say that Villanova University had an incredibly popular player. Well, the NBA thought, what better place for a Villanova star to go to than to the Philadelphia Warriors, because Villanova and the Warriors both played in Philadelphia. So it made sense for the fans of Villanova and that player that they would come and then buy tickets to see that player play for the local Warriors. Essentially, it was a way for the NBA teams to capitalize on the popularity of these college stars by keeping them in the cities where they were already playing. Let the universities build up the popularity of these players, and then the NBA teams could then come in and just scoop them up. And it made a whole lot of sense too, because back then basketball was hardly ever on television, and if it was only shown locally. The typical basketball fan was only familiar with the teams that played in the area where they lived. If you were a fan from New York in the 1950s, you probably never saw UCLA play a basketball game. If you were from Chicago, you would have never seen Georgetown play. So if you sent a college player from Washington, D.C. all the way to Minneapolis to play for the Lakers, the fans would really have no idea who that player was, except possibly from reading about him in the newspaper. So keeping college stars in the cities where they already played made a lot of sense. Turning a University of Minnesota fan into a Minneapolis Lakers fan seemed like a no-brainer. However, in the 17 years that the territorial pick existed, teams used that territorial pick only a total of 23 times. That averaged to only 1 or 2 territorial picks per year. In 1954, 1957, and 1961, nobody used a territorial pick at all. Of those 23 players who were taken as territorial picks, well, 12 of them are now in the Hall of Fame, and 8 of them never even made one All-Star game. So in 1949, the first year with the territorial pick, the St. Louis Bombers chose Easy Ed Macaulay from St. Louis University, and that was an easy choice as Macaulay is now in the Hall of Fame. That same year, the Minneapolis Lakers took Vern Mickelson from Hamline University in Minneapolis. Mickelson is also in the Hall of Fame. The following year in 1950, the Philadelphia Warriors were the only team to use a territorial pick, and they took Paul Arizin from Villanova University, and of course, he is also in the Hall of Fame. So the first 3 territorial picks all panned out, but in the 1951, the Minneapolis Lakers selected Whitey Skoog from the University of Minnesota. Yeah, I had never heard of Skoog either. It turns out that his entire career only lasted 6 seasons, all for Minneapolis, and he only averaged 8 points per game. Now, I am not going to go through all 23 picks, but I will go through a few of the highlights. Wilt Chamberlain is officially credited as being a territorial pick in 1959 by the Philadelphia Warriors, but Chamberlain played his college basketball at the University of Kansas, which is nowhere near Philadelphia. But in reality, the owner of the Warriors, Eddie Gottlieb, received a special dispensation from the league to select Chamberlain when he was finishing high school back in 1955. Chamberlain went to Overbrook High School in Philadelphia, which was well within the 50-mile radius of the Warriors arena. So the Warriors selected Chamberlain as a high school player in 1955, but could not officially complete the pick until 1959. So before Chamberlain even arrived on campus at Kansas, he knew that whenever it was time for him to go to the NBA, he would have to go to the Warriors. As a side note, when Chamberlain was still only 16 years old, Red Auerbach of the Celtics tried to convince Chamberlain to go and play for Harvard University in Boston. That way, the Celtics could later take him as a territorial pick. In 1960, there was no way that the Cincinnati Royals were not going to use their territorial pick to take Oscar Robertson from the University of Cincinnati. 2 years later, the Royals used their territorial pick again to take Jerry Lucas from Ohio State University. In 1965, which was the final year of the territorial pick, the New York Knicks used their pick to take Bill Bradley from Princeton University, and we can all agree that that worked out quite well, as Bradley was part of the only 2 NBA championships in Knicks history, and Bradley became a Hall of Famer. In that same year, the Los Angeles Lakers used the final territorial pick to select Gail Goodrich from UCLA. And after 1965, the need to keep their college stars in their local areas was simply not a thing anymore. By that time, television was a larger part of college basketball. Big-time college stars were no longer just regional stars, but they were now known nationally. And here is some food for thought. When UCLA was winning national championship after national championship during the 1960s, they were producing a lot of top stars. The rest of the NBA owners just could not sit by and let the Lakers gobble up the best UCLA player year after year. The rest of the league was afraid that the Lakers would become a super team. The rest of the NBA teams wanted to be able to get their hands on some of these stars coming out of UCLA. So, starting in 1966, there was no more territorial pick. Whichever team had the worst record in the league was automatically given the first pick in the draft, and they could take the player that they wanted most out of every eligible player coming out of college. Now, it no longer mattered if a superstar college player was from the East Coast and then went to a West Coast team, or vice versa. In 1968, the San Diego Rockets took Elvin Hayes from the University of Houston, and the Rockets fan base celebrated because they all knew that Hayes was easily the best player in that year's draft. The following year, the Milwaukee Bucks took Lou Alcindor from UCLA, now known as Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Now, let us fast forward to 2023. The San Antonio Spurs drafted Victor Wembanyama from France. Now, the player doesn't even need to be a top college star. In today's NBA, the team with the top pick is going to take the player that they believe is the best available player in the whole world, no matter what country or university he is from. The territorial pick made sense for the NBA of the 1950s and 1960s, and the NBA got rid of it at a time when regional affiliations did not matter anymore. It had served its purpose until it no longer had one. Well, that is our story for today about the territorial pick. Join us next time when we share another story from basketball history. That's next time on Basketball History 101, part of the Sports History Network, the headquarters of Sports Yesteryear. Go to sportshistorynetwork.com to find out more about this and other sports history podcasts. If you like what you hear, please hit that subscribe button wherever you get your podcasts, and check out our page on Facebook. It's called Basketball History 101 Podcast. There you will find short historical posts, and I'll also announce there when new episodes come out. I want to thank my producer and editor, Jacob Loayza. Join us each week as we continue to mine the history of basketball for more great stories from the past. Take care, and see you soon.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com. Hey there, sports history fan. This is Arnie Chapman, aka the Football History Dude, and I hope that you enjoyed this recent episode presented by the Sports History Network and were able to learn some good old-fashioned sports history knowledge nuggets. I started the Sports History Network back in 2020 with the mission to help podcasters find a community of like-minded sports history nerds, as well as helping aspiring podcasters to start their own shows. We have a little bit over 30 shows on the network right now covering all sorts of sports history. But as far as I'm concerned, we're just at the toothpick in the ocean moment, that can't even figure it out because there's so much more coming. We wanted to create the ultimate headquarters for sports yesteryear, starting with Podcast Network and our website, but we're going to continue to move into other mediums as well. And here's the cool part, because we want you to be part of our team. So if you're interested in starting your own podcast, or maybe being a guest on one of our shows, or who knows, maybe even writing an article for us over on the website. Seriously, all you gotta do is reach out to us on the contact page over at sportshistorynetwork.com. You can be as technologically savvy as a Neanderthal tapping on a stone trying to figure out this whole hieroglyphics thing back in the day. Again, it doesn't matter, because even if you don't understand the whole podcast space, we have a production team that can pretty much help you out with doing everything. All you gotta do, head over to sportshistorynetwork.com, head to the contact page, fill it out. That message goes right to me, and I'll reach out to you as soon as I can. But for now, dude, I'm through if you're through.